And hello everyone and welcome to another interview series, and today we're having something special because it's a new tournament, the Fistkock Cup, and its first winner is none other than Daylton, coming from a long break and taking it all. How are you doing, man?
Pretty good, yeah. Yeah. Like you said, I just came back, like, to tournaments, being fairly busy. Like, the last thing I played was, like, Fight Night in November, I think. So, yeah, I was off to a good start. So that's always nice.
Yeah, a huge confidence boost as we discussed before the interview, and now we can just flex.
Yeah.
Uh, but your lineup is interesting as well as what people usually brought in this week in tournaments, because they kind of got tired of Targon just playing for hours and hours, and they switched to very fast decks. And the first deck you brought is actually Spider Burn. We of course know that you had free Targon, not free Targon. Who? God no. You had
God,
free.
no.
God no. You had free aggro decks, but what were the choices behind it? For example, why did you decide to bring the Elise Aggro Spider-Burn?
The choices were. I actually took time to prep this time, and I was playing against. Yeah, I was prepping against you and Broken Ball mainly, and I started off trying, okay, how do I counter Lee Sin and Listrundle? Because, like, those are the decks you expect the most. And I was trying, I tried like two different scout versions, like the Azir Sand Scouts and the usual scouts, alongside like some TK Raka. And at one point I was like, okay, like, of course I'm winning more than I'm losing against this matchup. Like, they're somewhat favored. But then I got to play against some aggro, and I got completely destroyed, like, as expected. And I was thinking, okay, if like everyone's gonna bring Lee and Listrundle, like, I don't want to think some more about my lineup. I'll just counter those poor guys that are trying to counter those. So I was just bringing aggro. I brought Spider-Burn because I feel like the only like solid replacement in this lineup for Spider-Burn would be Pirate aggro, and Spider's is favored into that. So yeah, I feel like Pirate aggro has a harder time. Like, it's better against Listrundle, which is like always my ban in the lineup, so it doesn't matter. But like the faster Spider Burn is just better into all the other stuff like TK Raka and so on, like the counters of Lee Sin, right? And it's interesting. I actually only faced one Lee player throughout the whole tournament. I always banned Listrundle, which was like in every second lineup, and yeah, that was pretty good. That performed pretty well for me.
You
Yeah.
mentioned TK Raka. Did you get to face any TK Raka in the tournament?
Yes, actually a lot. I think 3 out of 5 rounds in Swiss. I played against Tikaraka, and then 2 times in semi. No, 1 time in semi, and then in finals against Navatix. Yeah, Tikaraka as well. We had a really nice, which is a deck that you're later gonna mention, like Nitro against Tikaraka matchup, which went like 20, I think 24 or 25 rounds. Yeah, that was a really good matchup. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, but we're going to get that later. Did you expect that many TK Raka to counter the Lee Sin decks?
After testing, like, I hit up Sorry, so we could test the TK Raka versus Listrundle matchup. Because I think I read in another Gigas article that TK Raka is supposed to be like 66% against it, which I didn't see at this point. But like, the Star Shepherds put in a lot of work, just smoking them down, and that's why I was like, okay, I think like at least 60-70% I gotta bring TK Raka because like so good into Lee. Like, I feel like it's one of the most reliable counters to it, because like it doesn't matter if your opponent tutors out like 2 eyes with a moon weapon or something, which is already a problem for like scouts to some degree if they have the answers, and they can, like, if they play Sonic Wave for your math. So I felt like TK Raka is one of the most solid counters to both of the meta decks. And yeah, I faced a lot, like all the way from Swiss to finals.
I think it was the tournament with most TK Raka, because in the others that we played or the guys played, it wasn't that prevalent. I didn't see it through the lineups.
Yeah, it's still pretty weak to aggro, obviously. Um, so yeah, but I think like I'm still considering, like, if I had to play a tourney right now, and like if I didn't bring aggro, I'd 100% bring TK Raka, because it's like it's really well settled in the meta right now. I feel like the few days post balance patch meta, at least, like, it's gonna change anyways. Even though Lee's gonna stay on top, so TK Rock is gonna be decent anyways.
I'm actually going to ask you more about this TK Rock lineup that you would bring if you didn't bring Aggro before you move to the next deck. Like, what would you play alongside TK Raka in that lineup?
I mean, so far it was the Sand Scouts, Normal Scouts, and TK Raka. That's what I would have brought so far. Another lineup would be TK Raka with Karma Zoe, because like better into Lee. It's like it's a 50-minute matchup, but it's slightly favored into Lee. So it's always either going to be like the two Scouts versions that I had, or TK Raka alongside the Karma Zoe. And then, which I still have to test, I saw the Shen Jarvan poppin', because like this is supposed to be really good into Lee, right? Because like the open attack with Jarvan forces 2 spells on Lee immediately. You have rallies, like you have all the good stuff that Scouts makes it so good against. It's just like slower, so like the mid range aspect might be too slow. But like I'm pretty sure it would be TK Raka and then like a Scout version, or it would be Karma Zoe with TK Raka and then maybe the Jarvan Shen, I think. If it's good.
Jarvan seems to be seeing some playtesting, maybe because of the buff and it's something for week 1 and then people are going to give back on it. I have seen Lobster trying double Jarvan, double Gear, and double Aurelion, so that was the spiciest list I think I've seen with Jarvan so far. But moving forward to your next deck, that coincidentally it was also an aggro pile, because we have full aggro lineup here, and this one was discard aggro, and I have to ask you the same question. Why discard aggro as well in the triple aggro lineup?
Mostly discard because it beats all the other aggro decks. Like I don't think there's a single aggro deck that does well into discard itself. Like you win mostly against spiders, you always win against pirates, you win against nightfall. Like discard is just in such a good spot. And it was a hard choice for me to bring it, because like everyone that knows me is like I don't really play aggro. Like I'm the one who played Karma as like I'm not as maniac as Catasis playing it till now, but I played it way too long and I played Spooky Karma way too much. So I'm like more of a control combo player, and bringing aggro was like a hard choice for me. I tried it last seasonal, and Discord bricked for me crazily. Like I think I went 2 and 4 on Discard or something, because I just don't get to make it work. So that's why I also wanted to like try it again in like a tournament setting, see how it performs for me, and it's crazy. Like it beats every other aggro deck, and that's already reason enough for me. It has a good shot into Lee. Of course, you don't beat like 2 eyes, but like it's really solid overall. I feel like it should be one of the best aggro decks out there. Like when it has a mediocre till nutty draw.
I see the new card that got rebuffed actually reworked back to a free to Legion Rear Guard. Why include it in the discard aggro deck?
Yeah. I mean, I think you were there. I don't know. Like one day before the tourney, I was still in RCO, like playing with Broken Ball, Sorry, and so on. And they all told me, no, just play Saboteur. Like Saboteur is just better. It's guaranteed damage. And I tested it like for another 4 or 5 rounds, and then I played some with Simon. It was like, why do you play this? And I was like, yeah, I mean, everyone said like this and this and this. And I was like, but I felt like Rearguard is something, right? And he was like, yeah, I totally agree. And the reason is like, if you expect the counters that we talked about, so like let's say TK Raka, they have a Star Shepherd, which you don't really want to swing into with your Saboteur because it gives them a free heal target. They have Eye of the Dragon. They have all kinds of like different 3 health stat lines that the Rearguard just perfectly hits. The only matchups that Rearguard is worse into, obviously, is like Shurima with the Dune Keeper being a 2-1, Deep, which I think is still a meme and no one should bring. And like there are not that many 2-1s you expect. Like if you think about Lee, Listrundle, and its counters. Like of course there's Sentry, but like I'm banning that deck anyways. So like I feel like the 3-2 stat line hits those matchups I was trying to target way better. Mostly being TK Raka and Lee, right? Like because I'll have to ban Matron, therefore like Lee is gonna stay open, and I feel like Rearguard does way more into it than Saboteur. So yeah, that's like the main reasoning behind it.
And did you get your hypothesis to confirm? Like, did you have turns where for them it was awkward to block the rear guard simply because it had free attack?
Yeah, it was actually amazing because like the lineups didn't have a lot of chump blockers. Like I said, it's a lot of TK Raka. It was like only one deck of Lee though. So they also played like scouts. I had Azir scouts against me. I had other burn decks. and rearguard just felt really good there. Like sometimes the Saboteur would have been nicer, like in the aggro matchups where they also played like Precious Pet. But even then, I'm like happy to get them to trade their Precious Pet into my rearguard for a value trade, because like it's such a like blocking a fearsome is just annoying anyways. So it felt pretty good. Like mostly he traded with a Saboteur or a Precious Pet. Like I high rolled and attacked on one, so it didn't matter in the end what I would have brought in those matchups. But like the TK Raka matchups, the rearguard absolutely carried, in my opinion.
Nice, and it's interesting you mentioned that it traded with the spiders, with the saboteurs, because that's a trade that usually happens anyways on turn one, I think, from both sides, because you do not want to give the other opponent the advantage. So if you had a saboteur, I think the difference, the 1 damage, wouldn't have been too much. Same for spider. Maybe spider would have mattered a bit if you would have played Precious Pet, but it worked for you.
Yeah, it worked for me. Like even against House Spider, they have to trade their 2/2 into it then, which is fine with you. Usually it would just get chump blocked. I feel like the two, like also in case, because I was thinking probably some people might try to even think one step further and try to counter the aggro decks. So I was thinking maybe someone's gonna bring like barrel control, go hard, something like that. And there it's just important that you have a stat line that survives like whales, right? And therefore like rearguard is already way better because he sticks through the whales. And it's like just better also in the matchups I expected and the unfavorable matchups. So that's why I mainly went for it. But yeah, obviously if your opponent attacks on one and you can't block with a rearguard, then it's somewhat annoying. But like then you just high roll into the Urchin and the Jury Rig, right? Like that's how it works.
Just high roll.
Just high roll.
We had this discussion and I even mentioned it on Twitter. It's people that think this card in general, I think, and aggro decks high roll and that are too powerful. But the thing is, you build the deck that way. You build the deck so you have access to your pressure very early on, so you can finish the game fast. It's their issue that they do not understand that and they go for slower decks. But aggro is definitely a punish sometimes because they simply blow off the steam.
I mean, yeah, in the spider list, I ran 12 1-drops. Like, if someone tells me I'm high rolling, playing three 1-drops, like on turn 1 and 2, then I don't know. It's like odd-wise, it's an average draw, right? Like if you mull for it. So I, of course, like as a as a combo player and control player, I'm like often, I don't know. Like if aggro high rolls you, you're supposed to be favored into aggro. I always felt bad like losing to those, like when I first started with card games, like it's ever been since then. But in the end, it's like you play a control deck, you are more likely to break because you need answers, which are like 3 to 6 cards, let's say, and they run 12 1-drops, or they run basically their curve is just full of maybe 3/4 of the deck, and the rest is like top end or like responsive cards or something like Vision here, get excited. So like it's just, I mean, you have to accept that aggro is just super consistent. It's built to do that, but like once you blew it out of the water, it's gone. So except if it's tier Fizz, like that sticked around. But yeah, I think like the hate aggro gets, like I used to give it a lot of hate. Now I played it some more, and often the decision making is harder than any control deck. Like I always like to act as a 5-head control player, like thinking by playing reactively, open passing. But in the end, it's like it's not easy for the aggro side either if it's on a high level to decide like whether they want to open attack, whether they want to develop, like how they even want to, like what do they want to trade away, like when do they want to block. I feel like there's a lot more decision making involved that people give it credit for.
And even going to low HP totals, I think, is the riskiest thing that aggro can do, especially against other aggro decks, because I think aggro versus aggro, it might even get more skillful than control versus control or combo versus combo, because in those matchups you just wait for an answer. Yes, you have an answer, you just ping pong, but in aggro versus aggro, every damage and every block matters.
Yeah, I mean, of course, like in the end, aggro is still draw dependent, right? Like if you don't draw average too well, then it's like also the mirrors are going to be super one-sided. But I feel like if both draw equally well, I think aggro is a really interesting matchup. I especially like the tier Fizz mirror as well. Like if it's not completely one-sided draw-wise, like I think that's especially where you could see how a skill in an aggro player can decide there by the way they played it, how they traded, basically how they developed, how they passed threatening answers. It's like, yeah, I feel like aggro mirrors, like you said, are are not as dull as it's considered for the most part, where you just full swing, press A in space and go in. It's like, yeah, there's a lot more involved.
And hopefully people are going to test that one out. It seems like we're going to have a few more aggro days before the meta settles, and people will probably go be like, alright, I'm going back to my Targon pile. It's fine, I can beat those with that.
Yeah. I hope, like, I mean, for me, like, I saw in OLS, like, quite a few people brought aggro. Uh, a lot of people brought pirates, which I don't think is the correct call. Like, it's performed well. It was like super included in the lineup so far. I feel like discard, uh, like pirates was so nice because it's like better into a Zyfreliot, right? But I feel like if you bring an aggro lineup, you're like kind of forced to ban it anyways, so you don't need to be better in those unfair matchups. So I feel like you need more polarizing decks or more flexible decks, which I think is Nightfall is like. I'll give you a smooth transition here to Nightfall. I feel like Nightfall is one of the coolest decks I've played, especially for sure of the aggro decks. Nothing really beats Karma S for me, but like Nightfall is a crazy deck.
Nightfall truly is a crazy deck, and why do you think it picked up so much interest? Because you decided to pick it up as well.
Yeah, so I haven't really played Nightfall. Like I played it right after Targon release. I tried like Daybreak decks. I tried like Nightfall decks. So of course I tested it, but after playtesting it a bit more, like I think BB told me about like Nightfall being popping off for him after he got the tip from Deech. Like I think Deech has been playing it for a long time already. So I got told, okay, just try it. And we tested the Lee Sin versus Nightfall matchup, like for, I don't know, for 1 or 2 hours. And I got to see like how different he could approach the matchup because like I didn't play the deck till then. And it's crazy. Like you don't need to be aggressive early. Like you see with the Stygian onlookers and like all the stuff you have. The main goal of the deck is not to like rush your opponent down, but it's made to go for big swings in the mid game. So around turn 5 to 6, you want to set up like big boards. You want to start with spell mana. You want to basically trigger maybe your Dusk Petals or your Stalking Shadows and set up a huge board swing. And that's where you usually get like good chips in that you can later follow up with like the Infernum on Diana, which won me quite a few games. Like especially in the TK Raka final match we did, like in the grand finals. I got 2 gifts from Beyond, and I was against TK Raka with triple broad backed, and he healed I think for a total of 20 plus health. And the Infernums alone dealt like on a Diana because I was setting up for big swings then. I played it alongside like onlookers and stuff, and I pushed my Diana up to like 18 attack. And then I went for an Infernum, and those Infernums pushed like well over 20 damage, like both combined over the whole match, which is crazy, I think. Like Gifts from Beyond is such an amazing inclusion from the deck, and I don't see it a lot of people play. Like I see a lot of people stay playing Fading Memories, which I don't know. I don't think Fading Memories is ever going to be better than Gifts from Beyond. Like, yeah, it might seem like overpriced, but you have a lot of options. Mostly you want to go for Infernum on your Diana to close out games and to basically get them in reach for an atrocity. If it's like matchups you have to slow play because you can't go for big swings and play into AoE and stuff. You have to like play it more carefully. So this is where like Gifts from Beyond shines because in the end, it's a really flexible card. Like you can tutor Illuminary Shadestalker. You can which is severely overpriced, but you have a lot of options. Like you always find use for it. Whether it's like a Gravitum against Scouts, I think I Gravitum through the whole tournament twice, like a Cythria, which was huge because I was able to not have to block on my defensive turn like much, so I could set up basically lethal swings. It's like Gifts from Beyond is so flexible and it allows you to suit every situation that you could find yourself in, while also being a 1-mana Nightfall activator. I think the card is just absolutely crazy.
We have been talking a bit about the pros, but what are the cons of bringing the Gifts from Beyond instead of Fading Memories, for example?
I mean, sometimes you find yourself lacking like 2 damage. You have a Doom Beast on board and you're like, damn it. If only I had like a Fading Memories right now, I could trigger it. Fading is especially for the cases we said. Like I said, you don't need to be aggressive early, but fading helps you, right? If you have like Stygian onlookers on board and you have like a fading in hand, it's just another 4 damage in the early game. And this is where fading shines. But for me, it was like I cut the ratio up to 2 Gifts from Beyond as well because I wanted to play test it a bit more, and I wanted to see how I can basically how the deck performs if I slow play it more. Like you see, like I also run Shadestalker. I think like a lot of lists still run Goat, which I don't like necessarily because like in the matchups where they play 2-1s, like other aggro decks and stuff like that, except for maybe Spider aggro, I feel like Lunari is always better because against Lee Sin, it's important that like sure your flights can stall and force the Zoe not to attack, but at some point you want to get the card draw from flight because the card is crazy. Once you attack, it gets shuffled back. You draw a card, and if you're then stalking, you get 2 more flights basically that are able to draw you some more. It's insane for hand fixing actually as well. Sure, it shuffles itself back in, but you get answers out of you get Pales which cycle more. Like you have a lot of stuff you want to cycle too in the deck for like the big swings. And that's why I also like Shadestalker because it sticks on board. I feel like the stat line does way more, except for like Fearsomes, where you want the goat. But overall, I was like, okay, if my opponent plays like a sentry, if I have to like leave a side fly out open, people decide for some reason to bring deep. Um, they have their 2-1s in aggro that are like the Saboteur that push damage already turn 1. That just blocks my goat for free then. I feel like Shadestalker is just way better. And like you don't need the gems as Nightfall activators as much, also because of gifts, right? Because you can just use it whenever. Fading needs a setup on board where you need to copy something useful, but like gifts, you can just play and use it later. So I feel like, yeah, like we said, Fading is better in the early game or if you're low on mana to like squeeze out some more damage. If you want to go like if you fast play the matchup and try to lethal them turn 5 or something, but like gifts is just way more flexible. I feel like, but worse in the early game.
Now that you exposed all the pros and cons, it kind of makes sense why this version runs both Games from Beyond and Lunar Shadestalker, because instead of the usual version that runs Goat and the Fading Memories, in which it's pressure, 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 and hope opponent doesn't have answer, you are comfortable if you are not hitting that pressure in the early game, but set it up little by little until the mid game, and then you have that huge swing that simply blows the opponent off with Gifts from Beyond,
Yes.
as you said.
Yes, I think it's crazy. Like this deck, you can play it as a fast aggro deck. You can play it like a mid-range deck. It's really crazy, like the potential of this deck. And yeah, I would have not thought that I would like fall in love with an aggro deck anymore. But I had so many spicy games. Like I was playing against Ash Nox, which is like, oh, I had a bricked hand. Like you want to play aggressive against these, and then it gets harder, right? In the mid game. But I got to play build up my board step by step to like play around Reckoning because I had a hand read that my opponent has Reckoning. And then once I like had assembled my pieces where I had like my Stalking Shadows, I had my 2 or 3 onlookers, I was able to go for a Nocturne, push his whole board down to 4 attack, right? Because like they have 5 attack units. I disabled the Reckoning. My opponent was forced to play a LeBlanc basically and tap out of freeze ranges once he wants to Reckoning. So I was able to keep Atro open to like basically because I was stacking a Diana, I could kill the 5 attack unit, and it's so cool. Like you have like the champs of the deck. I feel like seem really binary and like super. They tell you how to be played. Like you can't really play Diana and Nocturne in any other deck. It's like only Nightfall, so they seem kind of linear. But I feel like the deck is still has so many tricks and so many room to misplay. Like I've never felt like misplaying so much on an aggro deck like I did on Nightfall. It's like if you think 30 more seconds and you find like a different line, how you could have like dealt 2 more damage, or how you could have set up for better turns later. If you didn't greed, like spell mana is so important in this deck because like you can cheat out unit mana with Dusk Petal and stuff, and go for bigger swings if you like play more patient early game and maybe save some spell mana, like 1 or 2 spell mana, instead of playing a unit for an open attack. So yeah, I can only recommend this deck. It's hard to play, it's easy to misplay, but I feel like it's definitely worth just how flexible the deck is being able to play out.
I want to cheat some more info from you about the actual Ash Nox matchup because you mentioned it. How do you actually play when you are under the constant threat of the Reckoning? Because you said you set up in order to not lose to it. How do you not lose to it? How do you develop? How do you plan your turns?
So the matchup solely depends on like keeping enough pressure to not die to an Ash swing that just like lethals you because they freeze your board, while still blocking to some degree the 5 cost power units and not overdeveloping. So like what's really important in the matchup is to to keep cheap units, like you want to basically hit flight on 1. Like that makes it a lot easier because you get to draw more steam after and you get to replay the flight over and over. And it's really important to play the matchup in a way where you often want to attack with the flight, then stalking to get him again, because like the 2/1s chip in so much damage. Like you can probably swing in for a 4 to 6 damage, like from turn 3 on, every single turn. And you need to be able to keep that pressure up while not overcommitting. So you need to basically only play like 1 or 2 flights at a time, then develop a bit. Sometimes you just pass into the 6 mana because like their units are rather expensive in the end. Whether it's except for like Yetis of the Trapper, but that's like a condition. I feel like they play their Hearthguard, they play their Ash, they tap below the mana at some point, and that's where you can set up for big open attacks, where they have to use their freezes, which is good for you because like you don't have a lot of power combined on your like the stat lines are not big of the Nightfall units, unless like Diana gets pushed up. So you win by going wide and by playing it patient in that matchup where you build up a board where your opponent doesn't want to reckoning it because you can redevelop. And I feel like, yeah, I mean the matchup, I don't know. I don't think anyone should expect Ash Nox, but either you try to aggro them down or you try to go for chip damage with elusives. Because like also that's a matchup where Shadestalker just shines, right? Because it gets them the chip damage instead of goat, which just gets blocked by like an Omen Hawk or later the Yetis and stuff. So yeah, I'm babbling right here, like it's or babbling, but it's like hard to. I mean, just go wide. Basically, it's not that hard. Maybe save the Nocturne to some degree where you have to overcommit. You try to basically push down the power because they have no way of buffing their power back up. So if you're in hopeless situations, you have to sometimes go for a Nocturne play and just go in, hope they don't have a cheap unit and a Reckoning, and otherwise just go for basically just try to go wide and keep steam up with Stalking Shadows. So yeah. It's yeah. I mean, Nightfall. I feel like whenever I play this deck, I don't feel like this deck should win, but it just does. And then at some point it clicks where you know, okay, I have to play this matchup differently than I usually play the deck because like sometimes you're forced to play it slower. Especially like as I Freljord, I wouldn't expect to win this matchup, but at some point where you see, okay, I don't have to like rush them down, go for open attack into an avalanche. It's fine if they avalanche. If I have like Stygian Onlookers refill and I push for 8 more damage because I have 2 of these in hand. So I feel like it's really interesting to that the game speed solely depends on the matchup with this deck, even though it's an aggro deck, and you're not forced to just rush them down.
Very nice. We've been talking about the decks, we've been talking about the strategy and why this lineup should shine, but I would like to ask you about the format and how did you feel playing this format, because it was right lock but a bit different because you couldn't bring, let's say, the same region in all 3 decks. You could bring the, let's say, if you wanted to play Noxus, you could play it only in 2 lineups and not the third one. How did you feel about this kind of setup in the tournament scene?
I mean, I don't mind it. I don't think there would be like 3 Targon decks anymore. Like we saw, I think in OLS there were quite a few 3 Demacia lineups from what I've heard. Because it's like so good into Lee and Listrandal. But I feel like it didn't change too much. I think it's probably worse for control decks than aggro decks because going triple SI would have been a call if you expect aggro. But now you most likely have like one deck that's at least somewhat weak to it. And therefore, like aggro, I feel like since I would never bring Pirates now over Nightfall after having played Nightfall to some degree, but if Nightfall wasn't the case, it would be a lot harder for me because like Pirates is like the next best choice. Probably some also like the Noxus Azir Burn, which is like Draven Azir or something. Because I've seen Broken Ball play that, and then I saw it like also Bretch Kata I think played it in OLS yesterday. Because I feel like this I version of the Azir deck doesn't like suit the meta as well anymore. I don't know. I haven't tested it a lot. I heard even Swim said it's not well set for the meta anymore. I think he came up with it pretty much, or with a more refined version. So if Nightfall wasn't a thing, it would be a lot harder. Like I'd be kind of forced to bring Pirate Aggro, which would not be possible. But the meta just shifted in a very weird way, like at least for the few days after patch, where Nightfall is just popping off, and I hear all kinds of people like having success with it. So I don't think it changes much. I still don't like Riot Format in general, but I feel like it really didn't change much in the end. Because you have so much flexibility. Like there are a lot of viable decks right now. People are saying it's the same meta like during the first seasonal, pretty much, I think, because the meta is basically with these nerfs, we're kind of back to what it was before the Go Hard breakout. So, but I think people underestimate that, like, how many viable decks we have right now, at least in my opinion. Sure, Shurima isn't taking off yet. Like, it's mostly, sorry, just falling in love with Thresh and Aces and pushing it over and over for people to play it. And apart from that, we only have the Overwhelm deck with Shurima, right? But I feel like there's a lot of different stuff you can play right now. You have mid-range matchups like with mid-range deck with Demacia, which is just a stronger region. Even though people downplayed with all the nerfs that happened to it, I feel like Demacia is like still one of the strongest region because it's like so good at what it does, playing curve, and by being so good at it, it can like completely win games just with like good draws, and you have not real interaction with it and how to deal with it. So to get back to your question, I don't think it changed much. Like, at least for aggro lineups, it didn't matter too much. And I think for the top tier lineups, which should play Lee, Liz Trundle, and then as a third deck, I'm not even sure. Like, probably something like Scouts or Nightfall themselves. You're always gonna have like you're not gonna play triple region lineups to that degree, I think, anymore. Oh wait, actually, Zoe Aesol would probably be a third deck. So yeah.
Yeah, but that's, I think, one or two people who would bring it, as you mentioned. Usually there's just two decks that run the same region, that use the same region. But yeah, we also got out of you kind of a meta description or what do you expect this meta to be because we have so much variety. And we are nearing the end of the interview, but before we're closing in, if you had anyone that helped you prepare for this tournament, now is their time to shine and to shout them out, give them some love.
Yeah, I mean, definitely Broken Ball. I mean, I also mentioned him in the tweet, I think, like, because he was a great help, even getting me on the idea of Nightfall. I'll definitely have to credit you because you completely clapped me on Lee Sin into my counter Lee Sin matchup. I think we played the Scouts matchup, and I was like, how do you win two of three games? Like, of course you had like double I, but like I was really disappointed losing those by trying those matchups, and I think that was the first step where I was like, okay, I don't want to try to counter Lee. Like that's just not gonna work. So shout out to you here, and then also like sorry for sure because he's like always there. He's like a tad annoying when you misplay. Like he just doesn't stop like complaining, but like he's of great help, and like also Salty Simon, which I think like he also won the OLS tournament yesterday with the same lineup after dropping from the tourney we played together that I won because he brought pirates, which was a mistake. So yeah, I've like all those people really helped to that degree, especially since it made it easier for me to come back, not having played much due to like real life stuff. And yeah, that was just a good confidence boost for me and helped a lot that these people took their time out of their day to help me get back in the game. So that was really nice of them. Yeah.
Daylton is back, and we hope to see you around for more interviews, if possible, now that you're coming back and you are going in full force. But other than that, congratulations again for your win, and ladies and gentlemen, we are going to see you next time with probably another interview. See ya.